Most people know that the One Ring can make you invisible, but what if I told you that this was just a side effect? The magic of Tolkien's rings is far more complex than simple enchantments. Hello there, my name is Jason, and I'm an author who writes about the vast world of mythology and lore, like in Tolkien's world. I'm obsessed with the how and why behind legendary magic systems, so today we're exploring the mechanics behind the Rings of Power, how they were forged, why they corrupted each race differently, and what made the One Ring the master of them all. The story of the rings begins not with greed or war, but with a desire to preserve beauty. During the Second Age, the elven smiths of Eregion were the greatest craftsmen in Middle-earth. They were led by Celebrimbor, grandson of the legendary Feanor. But the elves felt a sort of sadness, a longing for the undying lands that they had left, and they watched as Middle-earth slowly faded and decayed around them. It was this sorrow that Sauron exploited. He appeared to them not as a Dark Lord, but as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, a beautiful and wise emissary from the gods. He taught them the secret of ringcraft, an art that promised to halt the slow march of time and preserve all that they loved. The elves, enchanted by this promise, began forging rings. At first they were just practice pieces, what we call the lesser rings. Some of these likely granted minor abilities, perhaps even invisibility, which became the stuff of old tales and legends. But these were merely essays in the craft that was growing toward a terrible purpose. Under Annatar's guidance, the elven smiths forged 17 of the Great Rings. What they didn't know was that Sauron was embedding his own dark magic into their creation, turning their desire for preservation into a tool for domination. Each ring was designed to appeal to the deepest desires of its eventual bearer, but they were all just bait. 9 of these rings were given to the great kings, sorcerers, and warriors of men. For them, the rings were a shortcut to everything they craved: power, wealth, and influence. They became mightier than any mortal had ever been, their lifespans stretching for centuries. The rings granted them authority and what seemed like immortality, but this gift came with a terrible price. Men, more than any other race, feared death, and it was this fear that made them the most vulnerable. The power of invisibility, which at first they could use at will, began to change. As they used the rings, they were pulled further from the physical world and deeper into the unseen realm, the spirit world. Over time, the invisibility became permanent. They faded, losing their physical bodies entirely until they were nothing but wraiths. They were trapped between worlds, forever invisible to the mortal eyes, but bound to their master. Their promise of eternal life became eternal servitude. These 9 kings became the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, Sauron's most terrible servants. They lost their minds, their wills, and their very identities, becoming extensions of Sauron's own malice. All that remained were their skills in leadership and war, now twisted to serve the darkness. They were a walking horror, a chilling example of the corrupting power of the rings and the ultimate fate of those who accept Sauron's gifts. By the way, I choose not to have sponsors, affiliates, or even mid-roll ads interrupt these videos. My work here is entirely self-funded thanks to viewers like yourself. I do have one thing I'd like to share though, which is my fantasy all-access library. It's this huge shared universe with all of the fantasy books that my team and I have written, where all of Earth's mythologies coexist in one shared universe. It's how I actually fund this channel, so if you're interested in supporting what we do, you can check that out in the link down below. Now, Sauron intended the same fate for the 7 dwarf lords who received rings, but the dwarfs proved to be a surprise. They were a stubborn and resilient race, crafted by the Vala Aule to withstand the darkness of the Elder Days. Their minds could not be dominated or enslaved in the same way as men. They could not be turned into wraiths. Sauron was pretty furious at this, but the rings still had a devastating unintended effect. Instead of enslaving their wills, the rings amplified a trait already deep within the dwarvish heart: their love of gold and treasure. The rings gave them an incredible ability to find precious metals and multiply their wealth. Magnificent hoards grew beneath the mountains, and the 7 dwarven clans became immensely rich. But this gift turned into a curse. Their healthy ambition twisted into an insatiable, all-consuming greed. It became a sickness of the mind, and a dragon sickness that made them hoard wealth for its own sake, driving out all wisdom and caution. This greed led directly to their downfall. Driven by the rings, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm dug too deep, awakening an ancient evil, a Balrog of Morgoth, or Durin's Bane. The greatest of all dwarven kingdoms was shattered from within. The other great treasure hoards became magnets for the dragons, who were drawn to such vast wealth. 4 of the 7 rings were ultimately lost, consumed by dragonfire, and the great dwarven kingdoms fell into ruin. Sauron may not have gotten new slaves, but his ring still succeeded in removing some of his most formidable enemies from the board. While Sauron oversaw the forging of the 16 rings, Celebrimbor grew suspicious of his motives. In secret, without Sauron's knowledge or direct touch, he forged the final 3 rings: Narya, the Ring of Fire, Nenya, the Ring of Water, and Vilya, the Ring of Air. Because they were free from Sauron's personal corruption, these rings were different. Their purpose was not domination, but understanding, healing, and preservation. However, they were still created using the forbidden knowledge Sauron had taught, and so they were still bound to the fate of the One. If Sauron reclaimed his Master Ring, the bearers of the 3 would also be revealed and enslaved. Nenya, the Ring of Water, was wielded by Galadriel in Lothlorien. Its power created a sanctuary, a land preserved outside the normal flow of time and shielded from evil. Vilya, the Ring of Air, was the mightiest of the 3. It was given to Elrond eventually by Gil-galad, and with it he maintained Rivendell as a haven of healing, wisdom, and protection. The last was Narya, the Ring of Fire, which had a unique journey. Its keeper, Círdan the Shipwright, gave it to Gandalf upon his arrival in Middle-earth. Círdan foresaw the great labors and weariness that Gandalf would face, and Narya's power was to inspire hope and kindle courage in others in a world growing cold. It was the fire in Gandalf's speeches, the spark that rallied the Rohirrim, and the strength that helped Frodo on his quest. It also helped slow the aging of his physical body. Unlike the other rings, the 3 did not make their wearers invisible. Instead, they could make themselves invisible, hiding their power from all but those who were meant to see. After the forging of the Great Rings was complete, Sauron retreated to the fires of Mount Doom and forged one more in secret. He poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life into a single unadorned gold band, the One Ring. This was the Master, and the 17 were its slaves. Its primary power was not invisibility. Its primary power was control. The One Ring could dominate the minds of anyone who wore the other rings, bending them completely to Sauron's will. The invisibility was merely a side effect. By putting on the ring, a mortal bearer was pulled partially into the spirit world, which made them invisible to physical eyes, but horribly visible to spiritual beings like Sauron and his Nazgul. But its power went far beyond that. The ring had a will of its own, often striving to return to its master. It could change its size, famously slipping from Isildur's finger to betray him to his death. It could whisper into the minds of those nearby, preying on their weaknesses and tempting them with promises of power, as it did with Boromir. The ring also granted its bearer other abilities. Sam, while carrying it, could understand the foul speech of orcs. It heightened the senses to a supernatural degree, allowing Frodo to see vast visions of Middle-earth from the Seat of Seeing. It could even project illusions of power, making a simple hobbit like Sam appear to an orc as a great and terrible warrior, cloaked in shadow and menace. The ring's ultimate power was corruption. It fed on and amplified the bearer's negative emotions, possessiveness, paranoia, and a lust for power until they were utterly consumed by it. No one, not even the wise and powerful, could master it. As Gandalf warned, anyone who tried to use it would ultimately be mastered by it. The magic of the Rings of Power operated on a fundamental principle. They enhanced the natural power already present in their bearer, but Sauron built a back door into this system. By binding them to the One, he tied their fates to his own. His genius was in creating tools that seemed to offer people what they wanted most, while slowly twisting them into what he wanted. The elves' desire to stop time and preserve beauty was a noble goal, but the rings showed how even good intentions can lead to stagnation and fragility. Lothlorien and Rivendell were beautiful, but they were artificial, held against the natural flow of the world. When the One Ring was destroyed, the power of the 3 rings failed as well. Lothlorien began to fade, and the elves knew their time in Middle-earth was over. The destruction of the rings wasn't just a military victory, it was the world being set right. It marked the end of an age of the elves and the true beginning of the age of men, a new era where the world would have to find its own way, without the crutch of magical preservation. The story of the rings serves as a powerful cautionary tale. It warns that true power doesn't come from dominating others or trying to stop the natural course of life. It comes from wisdom, courage, and the acceptance of our own limits. Now, if you enjoy these deep dives into the mechanics of fantasy worlds, I think you'll love what we're building over on my school community. It's called the Fantasy All Access Library. And it's more than just a place to get all of my fantasy novels and audiobooks that we've produced so far. I say we because I work with multiple writers on this because I can't possibly do it all myself. We release at least one book a month, sometimes more. And it's a community of fantasy lovers where we have weekly live calls to just discuss nerdy things. And it's the best way to support the channel and get a ton of great fantasy content in return. If you'd like to join us, the link is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.